Let's move on to round 13 to 15, which I have already completed. When you crochet round 13, find the stitch in round 11 first. Make one single crochet at this standalone single crochet stitch. Join the yarn and start crocheting from this stitch. For this round, make corresponding stitch on stitches in round 12 accordingly. Complete this round. And do not cut the yarn off after finish. For round 14, make corresponding stitches on these stitches accordingly. Also, insert the hook through the entire single stitches on both sides. And make FPDC 2 in 1. That is, make 2 front post double crochets in the same stitch. Followed by chain 1 between 2 segments. For round 15, make one single crochet stitch on each stitch from the previous round. In the single crochet stitch at the dent like this in round 12. Make one single crochet stitch. When crocheting, do not need to wrap the chains at the back. Follow the paper pattern and finish round 15. Now, let's move on to round 16. First, insert the hook into any stitch in round 13. Join the yarn in the middle stitch, among 4 double crochet stitches in the right. Then, insert the hook into the left and make one slip stitch. Next, insert the hook into this stitch again. And make another slip stitch. Then, start working from this inserting point. Pull the yarn through these 3 single crochets. Make one slip stitch each. Now, there is a single crochet stitch being wrapped by FPDC. Roughly insert the hook into this entire single crochet stitch and the gap between these 2 FPDC. Make one slip stitch each respectively. Then, starting from second stitch in round 14, make one slip stitch each correspondingly, all the way to the second to last stitch. Which is the same as the inserting point of single crochet stitch in round 15. Once completed, make the stitches symmetrically with the other side. After completing these 3 single crochet stitches, in the gap between these 2 stitches on the left side, make 1 slip stitch. Then, insert the hook into the top of the next stitch, and make 1 more slip stitch. Next, accept the end of this round. Every time after finish the slip stitches in the segment, pull and enlarge the loop, and bring the loop through the gap in next stitch to the wrong side. In this chain space of round 13, make 1 single crochet stitch, and chain 5 each on both sides. Once you finish the chains, always from the gap of the middle stitch, among these 4 double crochet stitches, bring the loop back to the right side. Then, make slip stitches. According to this sequence, complete the remaining segments. Pay attention. After finishing the last slip stitch in the last segment, bring the loop to the wrong side same as before. Then fasten off. Round 16 is now completed. Let's move on to round 17 to 19. For the DC2TOG like this in round 17, make this at the second single crochet stitch on both sides of the dent. For the rest of the double crochets, make it at the back of single crochets accordingly. Also, chain 2 between the 2 double crochet stitches. For round 18, join the yarn at the last chain space of the previous round. Then, chain 2 as the beginning chain. Then, make 2 incomplete double crochets, and yarn over, pull the yarn through all loops. It is equivalent to a DC3 bobble stitch. For the chain space at the top of each ripple stitch, make 2 DC3 bobbles, and make 1 DC3 bobble for other chain spaces. Also, chain 2 on each between 2 bobbles. Do not fasten off after finished. Continue making 1 single crochet in each stitch. For the 3 chain spaces, which is a little concave, make 1 single crochet stitch and 2 single crochet stitches, then 1 single crochet respectively. Refer to the paper pattern and complete the first 19 rounds. Then, fasten off. Once completed, let me continue demonstrating rounds 20 and 21. For these 2 rounds, we need to make them at the same time. Now, make round 20 first. Find a single crochet stitch, which is on the top of DC2TOG in round 17, and it is in round 19. On this stitch, use the corresponding color for round 20 to join the yarn. Then, chain 4. Next, make 1 DC5 popcorn, and we will name it as popcorn stitch from now on. To do this, at the joining point, make 5 double crochets in the same stitch. Then, slightly pull, and enlarge the loop, and remove the hook from the loop. Now, insert the hook into the first double crochet stitch. Pull the yarn through the loop, and chain 1 to secure the stitch. The popcorn stitch is now completed. Now, chain 1. Then, insert the hook into these 2 strands like this. And make 1 slip stitch. Followed by making 4 chains. And make 1 slip stitch in the same stitch. Then, chain 1. Next, pull and enlarge the loop, and put it aside. Now, let's move on to round 21. First, join the yarn at the 3rd stitch to the right of the joining point. Make 1 single crochet, then, at this chain space, make 3 single crochets. Above the chain space, make 1 single crochet, chain 2 and 1 more single crochet in the same stitch. Now, at the next chain space, make 3 single crochets. If you're not sure about the position of the above stitches, simply insert the hook into the strands on the top. Once completed, from the third stitch to the left of this insertion point, make one single crochet, each to each stitch accordingly, all the way to the third stitch from the right side here. Note: at the same time, insert the hook through the loop in round 20. And keep this strand and the yarn tail above the hook. Weave them in ends while crocheting. After completing this stitch, gently tighten the yarn. Then, weave in the end while making stitches. Do not make the stitches too tight or too loose. And do not wrap the yarn tails into the wrong side. When finished, pull and enlarge loop, and leave it aside again. Every time when we come across the single crochet stitches like this, remember to pull the loop in round 20 through, and make the corresponding stitches. Gently pull, and make the carrying yarn straight. Once completed, pull and enlarge loop and leave it aside. Now, continue making the corresponding stitches in round 21. Make the stitches until it reaches this side. Make sure the hook also inserts into this loop and make the stitch. Insert into the stitch first, then into the loop. Please refer to my previous demonstration. Continue crocheting these two rounds alternately. Until it reaches the end. After finishing round 20, fasten off. Then, continue crocheting until round 21 is completed. Now, round 2021 illustration is completed. Let's move on to rounds 22 to 24. For round 22, join the yarn at the last single crochet stitch in round 21. Pay attention. All the stitches are made at the back loop of each stitch for this round, except for the chain spaces like this. Make all the stitches in the back loop of corresponding stitches. In round 23, at the chain spaces in round 22. Make DC2TOG accordingly. And chain 2 in between the two DC2TOG. At the top of each ripple stitch, make 1 double crochet. The same way, chain 2 on both sides of this stitch. For round 24, in chain spaces and stitches, make corresponding stitches according to the paper pattern, and complete these few rounds. Once completed, for each dent, make a fan stitch individually like this, and use 2 different colors alternately. For this, I will just explain the method. First, make the first row of the fan stitch. Find the 3 consecutive single crochets like this from the previous round, at the same inserting point of the middle single crochet stitch. Insert the hook like this. Insert the yarn through the chain in this round, and join the yarn. Then, chain 6. Followed by making 1 slip stitch in the same stitch. Round 1 is now completed. Let's move on to round 2. Chain 3 as beginning chain. Then, at the back loop of the third half double crochet on the left. Make 1 slip stitch. Now, turn to the wrong side. Then, on each chain space, make the corresponding stitches accordingly. Once completed, below the third half double crochet in previous round, make 1 slip stitch. Pay attention. When looking from the wrong side, the stitch is at the top left of the chain. Insert the hook into 1-2 strands below the stitch. Round 2 is now completed. Now, let's move on to round 3. Chain 3 as the beginning chain first. And skip 2 stitches. Then make 1 slip stitch below the stitch. Then, turn it back to the right side. On these stitches, make the stitches accordingly. Once completed, skip 2 stitches and make 1 slip stitch, then fasten off. The fan stitch is completed. Next, refer to this demonstration. Simply finish the remaining fan stitches. Now, fan stitch is explained. Let's move on to rounds 25 to 26. Find any fan stitch and at the third round of the stitch, join the yarn at the same place as slip stitch. Then, at the back loop of corresponding stitch to make stitches for round 25. In the middle, here, there is a slip stitch. Symmetrically on both sides, make 1/2 double crochet and 1 DC2 TOG. For this side, make the stitch at the slip stitch same as before. In the center of these 3 single crochet stitches, make 1/2 double crochet and 1 DC2 TOG symmetrically. And also chain 2 in between the above stitches first. For round 26, bring the yarn to the next chain space. Then, in each chain space, and single crochet stitch, make the corresponding stitch accordingly. Don't cut the yarn off after finished. Now, let's proceed to make the corners. Make the stitches individually at 4 corners. There are 4 rows for each corner. For the first row of the first corner, make 1 slip stitch into the next stitch. Now, chain 1. Then skip 3 stitches at the 4th stitch on the left side. Make 7 treble crochets into the same stitch, and chain 1 in between the treble crochet stitches. Once finished, skip 3 stitches. Then, make 1 single crochet in this stitch, followed by making 3 chains. Continue by skipping 2 more stitches and make 1 single crochet. The first row is now completed. Now, let's move on to round 2. Chain 2 first, and turn to another side. Starting from the second chain space, make 1 double crochet each into each chain space, followed by making 2 chains. Once finished, at the second stitch on the left of the beginning chain, make 1 single crochet, and chain 2. Then, skip 1 stitch, and make 1 single crochet, followed by making 2 chains again. Next, skip 2 stitches, and make 1 single crochet. Round 2 is now completed. Let's move on to round 3. Chain 2 first, and turn to the other side. For the second to the 6th chain spaces, make 1 DC3 bobbles each respectively. For the 7th chain space, make 2 DC3 bobble. Now, for the rest of the chain spaces, make 1 DC3 bobble each accordingly. Chain 2 after making each DC3 bobble. Once finished, in the second stitch to the left from this single crochet, make 1 DC3 bobble. And chain 2. Then, skip 2 stitches, make 1 single crochet, and chain 2 again. Now, skip 1 stitch, and make 1 single crochet. Round 3 is now completed. Let's move on to round 4, which I've already completed. For this round, make corresponding stitches into the chain spaces. Chain 2 at the end of this round. Make 1 slip stitch in the third stitch, from the left of this single crochet stitch. At last, fasten off and finish this round. Like this. 4 rows for the corner are completed. Let's move on to the next corner. First, turn back to the right side, starting from the double crochet stitch next to this single crochet stitch. Count the number of stitches need to be skipped between 2 corners. And on this last stitch, mark on the stitch. I'm using the yarn tail to make the mark. If you have stitch markers at home, you can use it to make the mark instead. Starting from the double crochet stitch next to the marker, count 11 stitches. Join the yarn on the 12th stitch. Chain 1. Then, make the rest of this corner according to the paper pattern. It is the same as the first corner. In the end, it should be making 1 slip stitch on the right next to the marker. Once completed, take away the marker. And according to the same way, complete the remaining 2 corners. Now, I've completed all the corners, and also the last round. For each side of the last round, on the right of this treble crochet stitch, which is a double crochet stitch, insert the hook into this single crochet stitch, and make the stitch. For the rest of the stitches are made into the chain spaces and stitches accordingly. On the left side, on this chain space, make 3 double crochet stitches. During the process, weave and end the yarn tail of the corners. Once completed all the stitches, fasten off and weave in the ends. For the rest of the yarn tails, weave in ends on the wrong side. Next, follow the same way, complete to make the rest of the motif 3. Up to now, demonstration of motif 3 is now completed. Let's move on to seaming part. You can start by seaming the 2 motif 1 for each corner, seaming with motif 3 accordingly. Then, seam all the motif 2 and motif 3 together. Lastly, seam the remaining 3 motif 1 along each side. Now, I will use few motifs to demonstrate how to seam. For the details, please refer to the diagram on the paper pattern. First, take any motif 3 for the corner, and 2 corresponding motif 1 for the corner. Use this swatch to replace one of the motif 1. Use one of the yarn tails of motif 1. Thread the needle. Seam the edges of these two motif 1 first. Pay attention. Place another yarn tail to the top right corner. Insert the needle into the next chain and pull it through, which is inserting the needle into the back loop of the stitch. Bring the yarn to this chain. Then, seam the 2 chains on each motif. And the stitches on the side in between them together. Match and seam them one by one. During the process, seam the half loop closest to each stitch together. For the chain, seam the closest half loop on each side as well. For this beginning chain, insert the needle into the slip stitch to seam. According to this method, finish seaming this edge. And you can make extra stitch in the end. Once completed, leave the yarn tail here. Then, take the corresponding motif 3, using another yarn tail, to seam this long edge. Seam with any edge of motif 3. Same as before, bring the yarn to the next chain on the right first. Then, count 16 double crochet stitches from the corner to the middle of motif 3. Start seaming from this chain and the 17th double crochet stitch together. When you reach middle of the 2 swatches, For these 2 chains, seam them into the same stitch on motif 3. After finished seaming one motif, you may tie the 2 strands together to secure them. Then, continue seaming the reaming stitches. Finally, tie a knot and weave in the ends on the wrong side. If there's a noticeable large space in the middle, use this yarn tail to seam few more stitches. Then, weave in the ends on the wrong side. According to this pattern, finish seaming these 2 motif 1 for the remaining 3 corners, together with motif 3 accordingly. Next, on both sides of this motif 3, seam with 1 motif 2 on each side. Pay attention, the illustration of seaming sequence is for reference only. Take the same color yarn as the last round of the motif. I will start seaming from the right side. Find the 2 single crochet stitches in the middle. Begin seaming from the left stitch. If you're unsure which stitch, count the stitch in the middle and start from there. Start seaming from the other side of the edge. For motif 2, start seaming form the chain at the corner, all the way to the next chain, which is one side of motif 2, and the half side of motif 3. Once completed, you can also leave the yarn tail here. Then, seam another motif 2 to the opposite side. After finished, for the other 2 edges of motif 3, seam the corresponding motif 2 accordingly. When completed, continue seaming the remaining motif 2 and motif 3. When seaming the corners, it should be seaming the chains together on both sides. Additionally, for the last time seaming the corner, seam few more stitches as needed, to ensure there are no visible spaces. When seaming the last 3 motif 1 along each edge, seam with the yarn tails left previously, and always leave 16 stitches here. Start seaming from the 17th stitch. Next, according to diagram, seam all the motifs accordingly. So, the illustration of seaming is completed. Now, let's make the border for the blanket. Find one of motif 3 first. On the top right corner, join the yarn at the chain space. Using the same color yarn you used for seaming. Then, in this chain space, and the stitches in the left, make 1 single crochet each accordingly. At the beginning chain, insert the hook into the slip stitch, and make 1 single crochet. Work until you reach the second stitch of the right side after seaming. Once completed, make 1 SC2TOG. First, make 1 unfinished single crochet in the next stitch. Then, insert the hook into the stitch, and pull the yarn over. This is an unfinished single crochet. Now, at the chain space of this motif 1, make 1 unfinished single crochet. Once completed, yarn over, and pull the yarn through all loops. SC2TOG is now completed. Next, make 1 single crochet, each into each corresponding stitch. When you come across the chain space at corner like this, make 1 single crochet in the chain space, followed by making 2 chains and 1 more single crochet. Then, continue making 1 single crochet each accordingly, until you have reached the last 2 stitches in this motif. Now, I've already completed. Next, at the seaming part, insert the hook into these few strands, and make 8 treble crochets. Chain 1 in between the middle 2 treble crochets. For the remaining seaming part like this, make the same stitches like this. Next, starting from the 3rd stitch of this motif, continue making single crochets. Make the same stitches for all these corners as below. Make 2 single crochets, with 2 chains in between. Make single crochet in each corresponding stitch for all the edges. Whenever you come across a dent like this, make 1 SC2TOG. That's at the chain space in the corner. And the next stitch on the next motif. Make 1 unfinished crochet each. Then, yarn over, and pull the yarn through all loops. Another SC2TOG is completed. Now, according to this process, continue and complete this round. The sample swatch didn't show the middle part. Once everything is completed, fasten off, and weave in all ends on the wrong side. Like this, the illustration of the boarding is completed. Now, let's learn how to make and attach the tassels. We have to make 4 tassels. The way of making and how to attach are the same. Every tassel is made of upper and lower 2 tassels. Let's make the lower tassel first. Cut a piece of cardboard. It is about 9 centimeters tall. No specific size for the width, just don't make it too short, only need to be convenient for wrapping the yarn. Then, cut a 40 centimeters long yarn, which is the same color as the upper tassel, and another yarn around 30 centimeters long which is same color as the lower tassel. Next, take the yarn which is the same color as the lower tassel, and wrap it around the cardboard. Please refer to the paper pattern for exact times required. The swatch wrapped fewer times. After wrapping, cut the yarn. Then, cut one of the side. And use the longer yarn tail to tie few times in the middle. Then, secure it with knots. Next, for the shorter yarn on the top, and join it together with the other yarns. Use another shorter yarn prepared at about 1 centimeter from the top. Tie and warp few times, and secure it with knots. Hook the yarn tails into the tassel. Then, trim downside to make it even. Like this, the lower tassel is completed. Next, according to the same process, make one upper tassel. Pay attention, for the 2 yarns used to tie the upper tassel, it should be the same color as the tassel itself. And I've already finished. Next, join the 2 tassels together. Thread the lower tassel yarn end through the needle first. Then, pass it through from the middle of the upper tassel to the top. give it a gentle tidy up. Finally, for the yarn which is different color as the lower tassel, just trim a little and match the bottom of the upper tassel. Now, the tassel is now completed. Next, attach this tassel into the chain space of the 8 treble crochets. You may sew for few more stitches. At last, tie off and weave in the ends. Do the same for the other end. Now, follow this demonstration to finish all the other tassels. Up to now, the demonstration of this blanket is all completed. During the crochet process, if you have any question, don't hesitate to contact us via our customer service. From Susan's family, supporting your handwork experience, sharing the joy of life. Thank you for watching. See you in the next episode.